Hey listeners, it's Paul Andriola here. Why not join our community at Small Cap Discoveries, where we offer our members direct access to some of the best microcap investment opportunities available. Our members are getting access to premium microcap financings, research reports, and direct access to management. Sign up today at www.smallcapdiscoveries.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Small Cap Discoveries conference call. Today on our call, we have the CEO, Scott Tillman, and the president, Jake McGregor from Minerva Intelligence. Minerva trades on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol MVAI and on the OTC under MVAIF. The company is currently trading at 8.5 cents with roughly 77 million shares outstanding, or about a $6.5 million market cap. I'd now like to hand it over to Paul Andriola.
Thanks a lot, Trevor. Yeah, great to have both Scott and Jake here. Minerva Intelligence, a relatively new name, new idea to look at. So, gentlemen, great to have you guys with us today. Why don't we just start off with you guys telling us exactly what Minerva does? And I understand you've got a pitch deck, so I'm going to hand it over to you guys and let you roll.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Appreciate it. Minerva Intelligence is a software company, and we are based in Vancouver, although since COVID, there's been a bit more of a spread of people and we're not always in the office. The pitch deck I'm showing you here is a little bit dated in that it's Q4, so some of the things we'll speak to are not included in here, but this will certainly give a good overview as to who we are, what we do, and more importantly, where we're going. Standard disclaimer. So the first line of business that we are in is geology, which we'll touch on later. And our growing and focused area these days is in climate risk. I think, we all understand the problems out there. Climate risk is real. It's got all kinds of negative impacts on all kinds of different entities, governments, property owners. So just being able to understand and mitigate that risk is something that has been, I think, on people's minds, unfortunately, more and more, and it doesn't look like it's going to change. Governments are mandating more and more disclosure about those risks. Asset owners need to better understand those risks and be able to make good decisions moving forward. And we are firmly rooted in those areas in helping people make those kind of decisions. Jake, if you want to kind of jump into where specifically within physical risk we are, please do.
Yeah, so when people are talking about climate risk, which has just become more and more of a topic, especially since the COP26 meeting, and as more and more securities regulators are mandating ESG disclosures, a part of that is climate risk. And within climate risk, we're really talking about two different things. So there's the transition risk, which is as we shift to a greener economy, what changes are there going to be made? So if you're an oil producer, obviously there's some risk to your business there, but something that all businesses face is physical risk. So it doesn't matter if you're a hotel chain owner or you have storefronts or a manufacturing facility, all of those locations have physical risks associated with climate change. So, we're seeing increased flooding, increased wildfire, increased heat waves. And so all of those things are risks that are facing businesses. And we're seeing that more and more businesses are demanding to have the information at their fingertips so that they can better report on that risk and better understand it when it comes to investment decisions and business strategy.
And so how that intersects with us is, I mentioned we're software developers. The software that we make is meant to improve human decision-making. And we do that by dealing with numerous complex data sets. And our expertise is that we are able to deal not just with data sets that you would think of in a traditional algorithmic basis where you need all sorts of data to run through to understand what may or may not happen in the future. We are also able to deal with areas where there's sparse data or areas where there's changing data. So, I think we've unfortunately learned that, things like 100-year flood maps are not necessarily reliable for looking into the future, especially when you've had, 5 floods in the last 10 years in a 100-year floodplain. clearly something is wrong. So our software is able to deal with those sort of scenarios where you don't necessarily have the past experience to portend into what will happen in the future. And we also, just broadly speaking, also do a lot of AI work and bring in industry experts to help with what we do and deal a lot with standardization of data, which is increasingly important to just be able to understand kind of all those underlying risks. Jake, you want to take the next slide?
Yeah, so we have a bit of a unique approach to artificial intelligence, and while we use machine learning where we find it appropriate, our kind of special sauce and our expertise is in a field called cognitive AI, which comes out of the expert systems world. And really what cognitive AI is trying to do is mimic how a human makes decisions and understands problems. So one of the advantages that gives us is that we don't have to have these massive data sets to train our algorithm. We can make use of the existing knowledge that humans have gained over the centuries that we've been doing that. And so we can combine that kind of expert knowledge in whatever field we're working in, be it mining and mineral exploration or in climate risk, and then really pair that with the data sets that we have to make decision support making tools.
Thank you. And so what does that all mean? What that means is that we are building these type of software tools. And as I mentioned, we're in geology as well as climate. Within climate, we are currently working primarily with flood and landslide data. We're also working within wildfire. We'll get a little bit more into that. And then on the other side of the business, which is where we really kind of proved our efficacy and where we first started, we have some mining solutions that use that same type of software where you're able to deal with cognitive thought. And there's one software product in particular that we're seeing a lot of great success with, this one down here called Driver. The kind of, the same underlying themes about making decisions are what are the value propositions for our Terra suite as well. And Jake, if you want to take the next couple of slides and get into climate risk and where we're going, I'll just kick it off by saying this is a mock-up of one of our beta prototypes.
Yeah, so really what we're trying to do here is take together the learnings that we've made over the last couple of years and pull all of that together to create a single platform in which asset managers, asset owners can look at information about their properties and look at a parcel level scale. What are the specific risks that face those assets? And there's applications across a whole variety of industries. So one big one that we've been looking at is linear infrastructure. We've recently had a member join our board who comes from a very impressive background in insurance. And so he's really helping us tackle that industry. Real estate, so we're working with REITs as well as other property managers. There's applications in finance, and as you'll see in the coming slides, we've done quite a bit of work for the Canadian government.
So you'll see that the three areas we're focused on are areas where the risk is difficult to model because you can't look at that past information. So landslides, flood, and wildfire are three that really have seen just unfortunate explosion. And in part that is due to climate change. And so, that is why we're focused on these three particular areas. We have been very fortunate in that we have landed every government project that we've gone after thus far. And that is effectively on the climate side, kind of our building blocks that we are turning into products to monetize and turn into ongoing software sales. I'll let Jake speak about the three different projects, but I realize we've got the Canadian Coastal at the top, but why don't you save the best for last?
Yeah, so as Scott mentioned before, we're really experts in data standardization. And that's because of our incredible team of data scientists, AI engineers, and geospatial data specialists. And so with that expertise, we've been able to do a couple cool projects for the Canadian government. One of them was aggregating all of the flood map data from across Canada to create the first comprehensive look at flood maps in Canada. Unlike the US, we don't have these national scale FEMA maps. So bringing together these municipal scale data sets all into one picture of what the flood risk is in Canada is very unique. And that us doing that work has given us a distinct advantage, a kind of first mover advantage to have a foothold in that data that we can then bring to a wider market other than the Canadian government. Another kind of very technical project was looking at the National Hydrographic Network and remodeling that. So creating a new data model for that national data set. And then the last one, which we're just wrapping up right now, is a very exciting project that has the potential to move to a phase 2 contract, which will be $1 million. And that's the Canadian Coastal Zone Information System. And so we're looking at all sorts of different coastal hazards within the Canadian coastlines. And so that's looking at sea level rise, tsunami risk, wave modeling. And so this is a project that's funded by the Canadian government, but is meant to be commercialized. And we're already in the process of looking at, how we can take the innovations that we've been building here and bringing it to a wider market.
That project is really exciting too, because that is going to be a large part of our future. And we're currently working on a partnership with a relatively decent sized publicly traded company down in the States to help basically better visualize some 3D elements of that project. So, the government, as Jake said, their goal is to have us commercialize that. We intend to do that in parallel with developing the one for the government. So that one we're very, very excited about. Sorry, I went one slide too fast, but and then we don't talk about it quite as much, but it is right now, foundationally very important to us, and it was our first area that we delved into. Historically, our two co-founders are a brilliant academic at UBC and another brilliant man who comes out of the mining. So mining, understandably, was the first area that we tackled. We have 4 products within the mining universe, 2 of which really kind of extend beyond mining and we use internally. Solace is basically it's dealing with structuring legacy data. Leo is basically just considered a search engine on steroids. The 2 revenue drivers would be Target, where we help people just better understand prospectivity mapping by taking various data points and offering advice, which kind of goes back to the whole cognitive foundational underpinnings of our company. And then the one that is really kind of coming off the shelf like hotcakes is Driver. And Driver basically helps mining companies, and we've had some small mining companies. We've also had some very, very large mining companies engage with us. It helps you understand your multi-element drill data and visualize and better understand your ore body in ways that previously, if you could do it, would take months to years of work. So this one has really started to see some great traction. To give you kind of a feel for our history and where we're going, we are a relatively new company. 2018, we had no sales because we had nothing to sell. 2019 and 20 were what I would really consider kind of exploratory conversations with customers, doing consulting type roles to really help shape the product. And it was not until the end of last year that we officially launched our Driver product and made some substantial upgrades to it based on customer feedback. So I see down here it's got the asterisk, but we did indeed hit our target last year. We are hoping that we can at least double to triple that number this year, although revenue recognition will become a bit of an accounting difference for us because we are moving towards selling Driver on annual licenses, which is great because they renew and they're sticky. So that, depending on when a contract is signed, we'll just have a revenue recognition issue. But, these names of customers here on the left are customers that we have engaged with. As I mentioned, this deck is a bit old. We've disclosed in the last couple of weeks that we have had some great success with Driver and sold to a couple of more companies. The sales methodology for this particular product is we have found that customers are very intrigued, but want to have kind of a bite at the apple before they commit to it. So we've started doing proof of concept sales, and those are moving at a very, very good clip for us right now, and really expect that, with each coming week and month, that activity will continue. We were at Roundup, saw quite a bit of customer interest. Expect the same to come out of PDAC. And then when we get into the climate side, the revenue expectations there are similarly robust, but we think that the market is just substantially larger, which is part of the reason that we've looked to extend out into other areas. Jake, I don't know if you have anything you would want to add here.
Yeah, I just want to highlight the importance of the fact that we've been able to move Driver from kind of a consulting tool to a fully SaaS product, and what that means for our potential revenue in the future. All the contracts that we're signing on right now, which is quite a few, are annual licenses that mean that they're going to be renewing them year over year, and we'll have that revenue kind of being able to drive our innovations in our other departments, and that's really the model that we're focusing on is taking this kind of steady stream of revenue that we're growing in Driver and channeling that towards growth in the climate risk division, which we see has a lot of blue sky potential.
So just in terms of some of the stats, you can see the share price here is as of November. So we are clearly on sale. And, if our market cap was about $6 million or so today, I would argue that 1 or 6 times sales is quite cheap, but if we double our sales this year, I would argue 3 times sales is even cheaper. To give the audience a bit of a feel for kind of what our expense load looks like, we are spending about, call it $275,000 to $300,000 a month. So you can do the math to quickly determine that if we do hit our targets, we're pretty close to not just profitability but cash flow break even, which we think for a small software company is incredibly impressive. We're a team of about 20 people. I mentioned headquartered in Vancouver, but kind of dispersed throughout. And it's also worth noting that we have quite a bit of healthy inside ownership. All of our senior management owns quite a bit. Our board owns quite a bit. So we are engaged and believers. And then just to give you a bit of a feel for who some of those believers are, we've got a really robust team here. This doesn't include any of our software team with the exception of our chief technology officer, but we've really upgraded the team and the deck, or excuse me, I have to say the board. We have not updated the deck. We are in the process of doing that. But with that, I'll hand it back to you, Paul.
Well, thank you, guys. Very enlightening. How big is, two parts of the business, so from what I can tell here, sort of the climate change and the mining side. Can you give us a sense of what you think the addressable market is in both those categories?
Jake, do you want to take a stab at climate and I can take a stab at mining?
Yeah, so the climate risk it's really being blown wide open right now. We're seeing that all around the world, different securities commissions are mandating that all public companies report on their climate risk. And that means that any public company in the world, either this year or next, is going to have to report and understand their climate risk. So to kind of estimate on the size of that market is really challenging, but it's clearly why we're looking at that market and developing strongly. We're lucky that we started doing work on this kind of well before a lot of other people were looking at it. Right now, it's a very hot topic, climate risk, and we're lucky that we started working on this a few years ago and can kind of have that first mover advantage, especially in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the mining side, I think Driver on its own, I think is a multiple tens of millions of dollars of revenue potential. And it's worth noting too that Driver is a very sophisticated piece of software that we are now looking at using the same kind of brains behind it within forestry. So we're kind of internally calling it Driver for trees. But when we get into those bigger markets, we don't, as Jake said, it's a bit expansive to understand what's going on right now, but we think it's many multiples of what we could do within the mining sector. So, the expectation is that we should be able to sell many, many, many millions of dollars of software. But, kind of the way I've spoken to some of our investors about this is, look, you're getting a really cheap mining software company and you have all the climate for free. It's kind of compelling from that standpoint.
And can you give us a sense of a real world example? Like what does a mining company come to you and ask you to do, and then what kind of revenue do you generate from that engagement?
Jake, you want to take it?
Yeah, so we have a licensing structure that's based on how many seats, fairly standard for engineering type software tools, starting from $30,000 a year, moving up to $100,000 a year for an enterprise license, which is what some of the bigger mining companies out there are looking at. And there's really a range of use cases that they're looking to use Driver for. One of the main ones that was kind of the initial brainchild behind this was for exploration vectoring. So when you are putting all these holes into a deposit, you sort of are understanding what you're drilling into, but it's really hard to identify, okay, does this extend to the north? Is it dipping to the south? And our tool can help exploration geologists model the deposit and better understand. We've had a lot of clients who have been able to do that and have shown, really impressive results. When we identify a potential new zone in the deposit, they go drill that and hit really high grade gold intercepts. So seeing those types of results is really exciting. But the other one that I want to talk about is that because our modeling software is completely automated, whereas many other require a huge amount of kind of hands-on finagling to get the modeling to occur, we can model all of the elements that are being assayed for. So that means that geologists who typically wouldn't model elements like lead or cadmium that can have negative environmental impacts can now be modeling those elements and better understanding, okay, is there cadmium in my ore body? Because that's going to have a huge penalty and it's going to affect the bottom line of the mine as it goes into production.
Interesting, very interesting. I mean, the way you describe it, would this not apply to oil and gas as well?
So it's something that I've been looking at. Typically, oil and gas uses a lot of geophysics rather than geochemistry, which is what Driver is designed for. But we're really actively, as Scott mentioned, we're looking at all sorts of applications. So we think there could potentially be applications in medical, definitely in forestry. So yeah, there's a very bright future Driver.
Lots of applications then. So you sort of mentioned a little bit of competition. Maybe give us a sense of what the competitive landscape looks like. I doubt you're the only ones out there sort of promising to deliver sort of exploration in a piece of software.
With Driver specifically, there isn't really a competitive software application. I think our biggest challenge there is really just making the market aware of it, and also making sure that the geologists understand that it's a tool that they can use and shouldn't fear. There are certainly plenty of engineering firms that try and do similar work, but they don't use software like we do. And we think that's kind of the huge differentiator. Jake mentioned our pricing. You're never going to get that kind of pricing out of a consultancy firm that has to go out there and do the kind of things that you would need to do to get the results we can get. So I think that one is just head and shoulders different and better than anything that is out there. Within climate, it's not quite the Wild West, but there's a number of companies that have been around, and then there's even more that are springing up. But our mantra internally is that we're really trying to stick to our knitting. And there's a ton of competitors in the United States and in Europe, but there's not nearly as many in Canada. And when you think about our kind of leading edge, in that we've structured a lot of the data and we kind of understand where it is, we think that that's going to put us in a really good position within Canada specifically to really make the software robust, and then we can go elsewhere. But there's not any specific products There's, a bunch of other things you can look at on the internet to kind of get some sort of ideas to flood, but what we're looking to create is a multi-hazard application. And Jake, I don't know if you're aware of anything that's directly competing with it.
No, definitely not here in Canada. That's for sure. There's other people, like you mentioned, focusing on the United States, but we have a huge advantage here in Canada. And I'll just add on the mining side. There's a few other firms that are publicly traded on the TSX.V, Windfall Geotech, as well as Goldspot, and our main differentiator from folks like them is that they're really an AI consultancy. They have a team of data scientists who use kind of off-the-shelf algorithms to process data, and they provide insights. And sometimes those have proven to be quite valuable. But I don't see that business model being scalable like our software as a solution, a software as a service product is, where we can, get really high margins by selling that software, which we've developed and is ready to go. We have a sales team who is hitting it hard right now, and we get those sales occurring, and we get the revenue year over year.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. So you mentioned Goldspot, and the little I know about that company, they actually do get involved in sort of the ownership of some of the upside. Do you guys ever look at any of that? Do you ever sort of engage some of your clients?
No, their model is just fundamentally different, and it's clearly working for them, which is great for them. But we are not really looking to kind of have that information and then stake claims or anything like that. We're also finding that it's primarily some of the larger mining companies that we think will ultimately use our product the most, just given that they have ongoing projects. And realistically, if we're going to be trying to sell to the majors, there isn't really an opportunity for us to say, oh, we just saw your data that's proprietary. We're going to try and buy that land now. So it's just a fundamentally different setup.
Understood.
But we get that question a lot, which we understand.
Gotcha. Let's go back to your financials a little bit. So clearly, you guys are growing your revenues now. You had mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, that your expenses are running around 250 to 300K a month. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. So at that point, what's that, about 3.5 million-ish revenue point to break even? Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Do you think the current the 4.1 million that you had as of the reporting quarter that you announced there, is that going to be enough to get you to break even, do you think, or do you think you might have to go back to the market?
I'm gonna answer in a slightly different way. It should be enough to answer directly, but we expect that we will be growing at a clip that we will justify far higher valuations, and we'll also be able to prove to the market that with more resource we can do even more. So I'd say that we don't need to raise funds, but we hope to raise funds.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a good answer. Maybe at this point, I want to remind everybody, those that are listening, if you've got any questions you'd like me to ask the gentleman here, please use the chat function, and I'll do my best to ask a question. You showed the slide, the management team and the board. One thing we always try to look at, especially with small companies, just kind of the makeup of the board. And do you feel that the board has the right skill set for where you guys are at, or do you think you need anybody else to sort of strengthen up the board?
I'm glad you asked that question, actually, because I think our board, especially relative to how small our company is a phenomenal board. Our chairman, Jason Petralia, was a senior executive at Skills, which went public via SPAC last year, and he has moved on from there. Gleb Chuvpilo is somebody who I've known well over a decade now. He worked with Peter Thiel at Palantir. Prior to that, he was at Goldman Sachs. He just launched a artificial intelligence hedge fund. So certainly he's got the right kind of chops and has been really helpful in helping us think through different things. Jake mentioned our next board member on there, Marvin Pesco, a bit earlier. Marvin actually approached us, which was like manna from heaven. It was great. He is the one who comes out of the insurance industry. And he really helped us realize that it's these unmodeled risks that you guys can really play a role in. So he's been able to open up some doors to some really fascinating conversations with insurance companies. The deck, as I mentioned, is a bit old. Our next one on there, Clinton Smythe, he is a co-founder, the geologist. He, with copper pricing where it is, he's out in the bush trying to chase down some copper. So David Poole, who is our other co-founder, has replaced him. I couldn't imagine a better replacement for Clinton than David. So that has worked out great. And then there's me. So hopefully I'm a good addition to the board. But yeah, I think our board is a really fantastic board, and they're really good about helping team members as well as making sure that I'm kind of thinking through things holistically.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great to see. Okay, so you sort of gave a good list of the products that you're currently selling right now. One question we always try to ask is, apart from what we've seen here, is there any new products or any sort of new initiatives that you guys are looking to bring forward?
Yeah, so I don't want to put out a specific date because I think the team may kill me, but in the near future, call it in the next quarter or two, we are looking to rebrand how we speak about climate services rather, as well as also being a bit more specific about a couple of the products within there. And then driver is one that we will continually iterate on. Jake touched on the deleterious minerals. We think a natural evolution of that could be just helping think through mine planning. That way you can just deal with your tailings a little bit better. So we think that there's, I'll call it evolution within driver. But we are looking to make a splash with some of our climate stuff in the next, call it, couple of months. Gotcha.
Perfect. Okay, and then you had a slide up there for insider ownership. Can you refresh your memory? What percentage insiders ownership, and can you give us a sense of sort of outside of the insiders, who might be the other shareholders in the business, and not specifically, but is it retail, is it institutional, is it industry?
We've got a bit of a mix. The inside ownership is about 5% and change, Gesundheit. The initial funding for the company was primarily what I'll call like kind of not institutional, but near institutional people. So, like a guy who runs a hedge fund, but invested individually. It was also put together by a gentleman who is pretty well known within the mining community. He basically helped get our fundraising going before I joined the company. And then we did a raise at the end of last summer, and that was primarily retail, but also kind of a lot of the similar types of higher net worth retail. And then we do have a couple of institutions that came in early. The Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund came in early, which was kind of interesting. And then there's also a very large mining private equity firm that was one of our early investors. So a bit of a mix. And then, I certainly don't know. We've been having better volume lately, so I don't know who's selling and who's buying, but there's been some change just kind of through natural trading.
Okay, gotcha. What are your biggest challenges you're facing right now as a business?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think, one is just we're small, and I think getting attention, hopefully this kind of chat helps. But just getting attention and getting kind of the market to understand who we are and what we're doing. I think, sales is always a challenge. We're small, so sometimes, people don't necessarily have the benefit of knowing what we're doing. But we're seeing within mining that we had one major mining company that liked it so much that they recommended it to another major mining company. So that, that challenge, I think, will get better over time. And Jake, I don't know if you'd add any, COVID obviously was a challenge that everyone had to deal with. How do you deal with people, not coming to the office, come to the office, but I don't know that that's particularly unique.
Yeah, kind of a cop-out answer, but I think we've overcome a lot of our challenges that we had, over the past year or so. We brought on a really strong sales team, and they've just been killing it and bringing in a lot of business, especially on the mining side where our products are, really market ready. And so, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said, sales is our big struggle, but we've been able to overcome that, and it's just growing and growing.
Gotcha.
Moving into our new office has actually turned into one of our biggest challenges. It's months behind now, but small problems.
Yeah, exactly. Champagne problems. Where could this business be 5 years from now? I'm not really talking revenues and things like that, but what do you envision the business looks like 5 years out from now?
Want to take first stab, Jake?
Yeah. The exciting thing about Minerva is that we're not just people who are using the AI tools that Google and Amazon have created, which is honestly what a lot of the AI startups are. We have some incredible people who have founded this company and who are behind us, who have poured their life's work, their brain, into developing some of the technology that we have internal, that we have patents pending on, and that is our IP. And I think that there's a huge opportunity. We've basically taken kind of our expertise in mining and shifted some of that same technology into a new space, which is climate risk. So we really have this great opportunity that, because we have that expertise and that data, or sorry, that technology, we can apply that to so many different fields. And I see that, as we grow, we're just going to continue to tackle more and more industries, and hopefully be able to license that technology out to other companies who want to make use of it and bring it to a vertical that we never even thought of.
Gotcha. Fantastic. Now I'm looking at the slide. It says you've got 18.5 million warrants out there. And one of the questions we've got from one of our listeners is just simply like, what's the exercise price and what's the expiry
so there's a couple of different ones, but the majority of them have come from our most recent share offering, and those are at 25 cents. And I believe they were 2-year warrants from late August or early September of last year. So call it, a little over 1.5 years left on those. Gotcha. The options are kind of similar, and I think we have my video thing is covering it. I think we have the average option exercise price in there.
19 cents. Yeah, I see that.
Sorry.
Perfect.
So that's on the options, and again, those are almost exclusively to employees or a couple of consultants. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them depend on when the employee is hired.
Okay, fantastic. Now, odd little question, but I noticed in one of your slides that you've got a project in Veneto, Italy, where part of my family is from. So Veneto is where Venice is. So can you tell us anything about that?
I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. That's interesting. It was actually part of a data challenge, which we won, and that was kind of bringing some of our landslide technology, which is one of those unmodeled perils that not a lot of people are looking at, but we have world-renowned expertise in. And so it wasn't actually so much looking at the floods in Venice, which is obviously a very interesting and concerning topic, but we were actually looking at the landslides up in the northern region of the province. And that web map was kind of a proof of concept. It's actually still live on the internet, and you can go take a look at landslide risk in the Veneto region of Italy. But really, we early on we were doing all these little projects, and that's why I say it's so lucky that we started doing this work a long time ago. We just had a couple developers who were kind of starting to experiment and look at how we can apply our technology to look at these unmodeled perils, landslides, flooding, wildfire, and now we're coalescing and really pouring fuel on that fire and growing it into this full-scale product that we'll have some news around soon.
I mean, I'll add our landslide expert is from Italy, so I think he wanted to choose a province in its own way.
Good. There's some good things that come from Italy. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, you talk about floods, you talk about some of the things that are now headline. We're seeing a lot of things, climate issues that are literally on the 6 o'clock news. I mean, how do you market around that? I got to imagine that, there must be a lot more opportunities that seem to be a lot more sort of common now how do you take advantage of that? If that's sort of the ghoulish way of saying it, how do you take advantage of some of the things that we're all seeing? You know, the local floods here in Vancouver, for example, and some of these other things. How does that affect your immediate opportunities?
I think the first part is it's clearly made for awareness. You know, I think people no longer have their head in the sand, and you know, it's affecting people. So it's become something that's front and center. The way we're kind of thinking about how do we get that message out there is, you know, if the government trusts us, so can you, insurance company, or so can you, power company that has, you know, something right next to a major waterway. So it's certainly challenging, but that's, you know, that's kind of the way that we're looking to build those relationships and customers. And then, you know, and then it's basically just showing them what's in front of their face and letting them understand it. It's, you know, we all know that there's going to be a problem. You know, this can help you think about, you know, do you need to mitigate it? Do you need to think about, you know, this factory, maybe you don't want to invest in it what you thought you were going to invest in it. Maybe you need to, you know, add some sort of reinforcement. So I think that's kind of how we're thinking about it. And those, you know, those conversations are always ongoing. But, you know, we think that it's going to be some of those kind of, you know, bigger infrastructure owners, the insurers of those properties. You know, some of them are self-insured. So, you know, the corporate owners. You know, we've also had some conversations with cities and provinces who typically are interested, but a little more budget constrained. But there might be, you know, avenues to work with them. So it's evolving very fast, and we think that the way we've positioned it with kind of government efficacy is a good step.
Guys, we're almost at the end here. Another question we always like to ask is, you know, from the standpoint of investors like us, what sort of metrics or even catalysts should be really paying attention for to sort of showcase that you guys are, you know, hitting your models or executing on your business plan?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two basic things you should be looking for from us. One is just, you know, we will be announcing more and more driver sales. So I think, you know, if you see those, that's obviously a good sign. If you know there's no announcements, then that's not a good sign. But that's one that we will be reporting on pretty frequently. We're talking at a board level if we're going to do that more than just quarterly. But that is certainly one that will be a relatively easy thing to monitor. And then, you know, I think the other side is that we also have a couple of what I'll call lumpy, big, exciting projects. You know, we mentioned the Canadian Coastal Zone. That would be, I believe, our largest project ever. We are working with I'll just simply say a branch of the US government on a project that it's certainly not a slam dunk, but if that were to happen, that would be a huge one. So there's a couple of really big projects too that we're certainly hoping we land. And that would be kind of the other thing to keep an eye out for. And then just watching our continued product announcements within climate. So I think if you just keep an eye on driver, you know, hope for some of the big ones and just, you know, mind to what we're doing in climate, I think you'll be able to have a pretty good feel for if things are going well for us.
Fantastic. Listen, sort of last thing, we always like to give you guys an opportunity to give us a key takeaway or sort of a parting message. If there's one thing you want to make sure everybody walks away with today knowing, what would that be?
That we're cheap. We should be doubling revenue every year for the foreseeable future, and we trade like a teeny free option almost. So, you know, I'm not saying to put grandma's entire retirement into it, but I think we are a very interesting company that should do you well. Hey,
grandma is very risk tolerant, so grandma might just put in a lot of money. Yeah. There you go. Listen, guys, if somebody wants more information, what's a website or what's the best way to get more information from you guys?
MinervaIntelligence.com. Also, our ticker MVAI.ai. And you did actually mention our OTC stock should be moving off the pink sheets shortly. We're just waiting on that fun process to conclude itself. And you can also always feel free to reach out directly to us. Our emails are on our website or just ir@MinervaIntelligence.com.
Fantastic. Well, great. We've been speaking with CEO Scott Tillman and President Jake McGregor from Minerva Intelligence. As they just mentioned, the symbol MVAI on the Venture Exchange. Guys, thanks for joining us today. And listen, we look forward to catching up with you guys in the not too distant future.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.